Hi, my name's Dan. This is my shop, and if you are into scratch building model airplanes or building airplanes from kits or building airplanes, period, this is the place to be. And I encourage you to please subscribe below. We are trying to build up our subscribership. Actually, we just went through a milestone. We passed through 100 subscribers just the other day. Now, it's kind of funny because in the last few weeks, we have picked up so many subscribers, and I have a feeling it has to do with this self-quarantining coronavirus thing where everybody's stuck inside and they're just watching lots of YouTube and Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, all those kind of things. And so anyways, I think we've picked up quite a few viewers just off of that, but I'm really happy about it because we've had some really great comments and we've had some really great suggestions for other videos, and other questions like that have come off of it. It's been a lot of fun. It's a pretty fun group that we're building up here, and I'm really happy with the way things are going, and let's just keep building on with that. So remember, hit the subscribe button down below if you aren't already a member, and also hit that bell so that you'll know every time we kick out a new video. And when I mean we, I mean me and, oh, she's gone. Oh, there you are. Kitty, my editor. Anyways, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the airplane. Of course, we're still continuing to build the Ryan's Rebel. And at this point, I have been adding more of the sheeting-like parts to it. As we finished up the top sheeting here, this is the top deck sheeting, 1/8 inch cross grain all the way across, and all the way down to the stabilizer post. And this is gone very well. It's going to be very strong. I mean, this box right now, just with 3 sides of it covered, has pretty much straightened the fuselage, so it is, held in its straight position solidly now. And we've got a couple other places that need more work here. Of course, we've got to put the same thing on the bottom here. From this point to this point is going to be sheeted balsa again. And then there's a little plate on the end there for the tail wheel. And then from here, going forward to here, is a 1/8 inch light ply plate. And that'll be coming up here. But first, I've got some things I need to insert in here. There's some triangle stock bracing that needs to go in there. And once those are all in place, this baby will be buttoned up, and we can start probably getting ready to put the hardware onto it, like the servos, and then eventually move to the covering of it. And so I just ordered the covering, and it's actually, I ordered it the other day. It just showed up yesterday, which is pretty exciting. Starting to get mail and packages more in a timely fashion. Evidently, they're figuring out how to ship things and get things from the dispatch centers and stuff like that. With less employees, they had a big break in it. It's like the Amazon Prime where you got everything with 2 days was suddenly like a week and a half. And now things are starting to narrow up. So that's a good deal. Anyways, today I had a couple of questions, and I mentioned in the last video that I found another CA glue provider that I was taking a look at, and I just kind of wanted to take a little bit of time to share with you what I've learned from them today and talk a little bit about the different CAs that I use when I'm building a project like this airplane. Cyanacrylic glue, or CA, or super glue. Those are the different names that it has gone under in the past, is easily the biggest advent to the scratch building or kit building, or putting together of wood for an airplane. Probably the biggest advent ever, and simply because it took away a lot of, well, let's think about it for a second. If you were gluing together wood for a kit like this, typically you would have like white glue. That was probably the most used glue at that time. You'd use white glue in there, and then you'd have to pin it, and you'd have to brace it, and then you'd have to let it sit for about a half an hour to an hour until it was solidly dried. And then you moved on to the next step. However, when CA came along, using super glue instead, it would allow you to hold the part in place, put a drop of the glue on there, and bam, cured instantly, and just ready to move on to the next step. It sped up the ability to build an airplane just many times over, I'm sure. I couldn't imagine going back to it now using just white glue or wood glue in order to put together a plane. CA was probably one of the biggest advents and technological breakthroughs for model airplane building from the scratch building or kit building end of the hobby. Now, you can get CA glue in many different places. I mean, you can go to the hardware store and find CA in one form or another. They still make the super glues and things like that, and instant gels and stuff like that. The thing that you're not going to find, though, is the quantity for the price. You can buy it from the hardware store, but it's going to be quite expensive, and you might not get the right viscosity. We have so much more selection within the hobby-driven part of it. We have thin, medium, and thick available, whereas if you go to the hardware store, you're probably going to find, I would think probably medium is going to be the most common you're going to find. And sometimes you need a thin or a thick instead of a medium in order to get you by with whatever project. Plus, they sell those little tiny bottles for, $5, $8 for that, when you could go to the hobby store and get a bigger quantity, like a 1 or 2 ounce bottle for about the same price, and you've got a lot more of it to use and a lot more of it to build your plane with, instead of spending a ton of money just to get just the glue in those little tubes. Much more practical this way. The scale is much bigger. Now, I had a comment the other day from one of the viewers that was asking me about the different uses, where you would use glues in different places. And I think he was asking more broad, because there are many different kind of adhesives that you use when you're building a model airplane. I would say probably 80% of the plane is going to be done with CA. The rest of it's going to be done with either a white or a wood glue or maybe an epoxy. But today I just wanted to talk about the different types of CA glues and uses within an airplane that you're going to come up with. So the different viscosities, like I said, we have that I mentioned before, was we have a thin, we have a medium, which is thin. Thin is like water. Medium is probably more of like, I don't know, just something just thicker than water. It's more of an ointment kind of thing. And then, of course, thick is a thick gel that's used for a longer setting time. And so let's talk about how we use these differently on the airplane. Okay, so let's start off with thin. Thin is like water. It's just, when you shake it, you can just hear it splish splashing around in there. Thin is most commonly used when you're going from a balsa to a balsa connection. So for instance, if you have a rib that's sitting like that, and then you've got a spar that's also made of balsa that tucks down into it, you would be able to put those two together, and you assemble it ahead of time and then just drop this in there, and thin flows into the joint. It's supposed to flow all the way through the joint, saturate the wood, and then seize very quickly and be done. Most of the time within just a couple seconds. And sometimes it hits and it will cure so fast you'll see smoke coming off of it. And by the way, try not to breathe those smoke fumes in. They're really tough on the nose, and they're also very hard on the eyes. If you get it in your eyes, it just stings like crazy. But anyhow, thin is used most of the time for a balsa to balsa joint. It could be either a spar to a rib, or it could be to sheeting to framework that's also balsa. Very quick setting. That's what you want from a thin. The next one would be like a medium. That's my medium one here. Medium is got a thicker viscousness to it, and it will actually, when you set it across a surface, it will leave a bead. Whereas the thin, usually if you put it on a surface, it absorbs into it instantly. This will actually sit up on top of it for some time before it finally cures. And the idea of that is with the medium, you will have about 15 to 30 seconds of work time with it. So if you need to test fit a part, or you're putting a part down onto it and it needs to be moved around to an exactness before you want it to finally set, that is the better glue for that, because it's going to give you the ability to move it around for up to about, like I said, 15 to 30 seconds, and then it will set hard. Now, there is another thing that you can add that's kind of cool with the mediums, is you could use a accelerator. And this is just a spray accelerator, and it just sprays on like so. And once that accelerator hits the glue that's still in the gel phase, it will set it instantly, just like the thin does when it lands. It usually just hardens instantly. Well, this is a way that you can get the part into position exactly the way you want it, and then hit it with that accelerator, and it will freeze it in that position. So you don't have to wait the additional whatever time left that you have on there. So accelerator is a great asset to have if you need to be able to stick something down once you get it in the right position. The last one is thick. I don't use thick very often. If I'm going to use thick, thick has a long setting time to it. It'll go from 30 seconds to a minute before it sets up. And most of the time, if I'm setting up some kind of a part that needs to be sitting for a while, or I need some more working time on it, I will just use wood glue or something like that. Or maybe I'll use Gorilla Glue. And it will give me more time to set, and I don't have to worry about it. That's generally going to be a part I'm clamping. But thick, to me, is just not one of the ones that I use more of. I was able to get this as a pack of, this is the 1 ounce bundle, is what they call it. So you get thin, medium, thick, and then a bottle of accelerator for 25 bucks. It's actually a pretty good deal, especially when you add the accelerator to it. The glues are very competitively priced with what you would find in the hobby shop. I think it's actually a little bit cheaper, and it's free shipping. So that's why I went with this pack, just to test it out and see how. And so far, the glues have been really good. I haven't had any problems with them. I've only used the medium. I've still got a bottle of thin that I'm using up. I'm frugal. I'm going to use that whole bottle up before I start opening up a new bottle of thin. And then the thick, like I said, I don't typically use, but maybe we'll find a couple of uses for it as we continue on. So let me be a little bit more specific about the uses of the different viscosities. Like I was saying, thin typically is going to be used for assembling the wing, the parts of the wing, including the ribs and the spars and all those connections and the sheetings that go onto it and so forth. I'll use thin to tack the sheeting in place so I get it positioned correctly. When it comes to actually gluing the sheeting to the rib, I might want a little more working time, so I will use medium and put it on there and then just hold the part over it and wait the 15 to 30 seconds until the part is glued down. When it comes to things like different types of wood, so say like on this plane here, there is considerable amount of plywood that has been glued to balsa on the outside. Now I use the thin, or excuse me, I don't use the thin, I use the medium for that. You could also use a thick, or you could also use white glue to get the same thing done. But the medium is really good if you're having to glue two different types of woods together. Balsa to balsa, like I said with the thin, is perfect. But if you were to take thin and try to glue a piece of balsa to maybe a piece of plywood, sometimes the glue won't absorb into the plywood very well, so it will actually absorb in separately and leave that gap, and then the parts just come right back apart again. It works best, I find, to lay down a layer of medium and clamp it to it, because the medium is going to have that gel that helps to fill up all the little holes, the pores, the grooves that are in the plywood parts, and fills them up with that glue goo. Yeah, that's a technical term. It's glue goo. It will fill up that particular part of the joint and then make the bond solid. The other thing is you could always use the medium. You could go ahead and bond the two parts, balsa and plywood, together, and then hit it with that accelerator, and then it will instantly fire the whole thing. But anytime you're gluing different types of woods together, I think medium is probably your better choice, or maybe even thick too, simply because the wood, thicker glue is going to absorb into the harder plywood better than it does into the balsa. And that's holding those two pieces together it gets to be a bit of a struggle, but medium seems to be the trick to getting it done correctly. So let me tell you about this new CA company that I found. At least they're new to me. I guess they've been around for 30 years, but I'd never seen them before. When it came to buying my CA before, I would typically just go down to the hobby shop and buy whatever they had on the shelf. So for instance, this is Al's Glue. However, this is actually, I think the name of the company is Bob Smith. Is that right? Yeah, Bob Smith Industries. This is their private label glue. And anyways, when you go to the hobby shop, you just buy whatever they have in stock. You don't really have a choice. I mean, there's lots of different brands out there, but a hobby shop really has no reason to carry 20 different brands of glue, so you get whatever they got. The thing that you don't know is how long that glue's been on the shelf. And I know there's been issues lately with, there's not as many people building airplanes as there used to be. When I got into this hobby 30 years ago, the only way that you could be flying a radio control airplane is you had to have built it somehow, either from a kit or from plans or something like that. And so people were using a lot of glues and stuff like that, and a lot of balsa and a lot of other things to build these planes. Well, when the advent of the almost ready to fly airplane came along, it kind of, people stopped building airplanes. And so the supplies that we had started to stack up because people weren't using them. And eventually they had to throw them away or something like that, because the glue can actually go bad on the shelf after a while if it's not stored correctly or if it's not refrigerated and kept cool. So the thing that you never know when you're buying glue from the hobby shop, I guess, is how long it's been there, or how long it was at the wholesaler before it got to them, or when that batch of glue was made. So the other thing that I've got is we live in a town where we talk about there's less and less hobby shops now than there used to be. The nearest hobby shop to me now is 70 miles away, so I have to be probably going to that town for some purpose if I'm actually going to stop in at the hobby shop and, oh, by the way, buy the glue. Luckily, things are available online now all the time, but you never know from Amazon how long the glue's been there or where it's coming from, all those kind of things. So you just kind of gotta, I guess the whole idea of being able to buy glue online is that you get kind of a better perspective of the freshness. I found this glue, this Starbond glue, while I was watching a luthier. You know what that is? Luthier. That's a guy that builds guitars, or a person who builds guitars. And I'm talking custom acoustic, fancy. I love watching videos about craftsmanship. It doesn't matter if somebody's building a house or if they're building a car or something like that. I love to watch other people build things and maybe learn some of the things from them. And this is one of them. This came from a guy named Monty McKinnon. He's a luthier. He builds beautiful acoustic guitars, and I'll put a link to his site down below so you can go take a look at some of that. The work that those guys put into the craftsmanship wise is unbelievable. I love watching it. But they do these little insets in the guitar around the sound hole, the hole in the guitar's face. And sometimes they put shell in there, or they put different kinds of woods in there, and they stack them in there and make it a very aesthetic and pretty looking thing. And this is what he uses to put those parts in there. He'll use CA to get those parts bonded into place. And so I thought, wow, CA, I use that. And so I looked into the brand that he was talking about, and they've got very good prices and very good packages, and they're produced right in the United States, I believe. Actually, I'm not sure about that, but I know that they're based out of Riverside, California, which isn't too far from me, and the product comes very quickly. I did do a little bit of talking with the marketing department about the freshness of the glue, because that is always something that's important to me, is how fresh is the glue. And they said that the glue that they're sending out from their online orders is at the most 1 to 2 months old, and that's it. That's pretty fresh. The shelf life, if you were to take a bottle of glue and keep it in your refrigerator, if it's unopened, it'll last about 10 years. But the shelf life, once you open the glue, is the thing you got to pay attention to. Once you pop that open and you're letting air from inside the shop into your glue, and any moisture that's in it, it starts attacking its ability to bond quickly. So you want to store this when you're not. They give you a nice little cap you could put on there and store these in your refrigerator when you're not using them. They also give you a nice little pack that's got 4 narrow down tips on it, so you can drop the glue exactly onto the surface. They look like this one here. This little point that comes down to a very fine tip, and that way you can put the glue exactly where you need it. They give you 4 plus one of these red caps for every bottle. That's pretty cool. I wouldn't use these so much, I think, on a medium or a thick, but I sure use them on my thin. And eventually, as you're using them, they'll kind of gum up, and so you got to take one off and put another one on, a fresh one, because they will get blocked up after a while. But anyways, Starbond glue. I just ordered this. Their glue seems to be pretty darn good so far in what I've used. I've only used the medium, and I've used it to do the final sheeting on the top deck. And I'm going to go to the bottom deck on there. But if you're interested in it, I'm going to put a link down below. It's an affiliate link, so that if you order glue from Starbond, if you need to place an order or something like that, and you use that link to get to their site, then they will actually give me a little bit of a commission for sending you their way. Yeah, I got that right. Yeah, just like that. And it doesn't cost you anymore, but they give us a little commission so that we can keep bringing these videos to you, and every little bit helps. I'm not expecting you to do it, but if you want to, we'd be definitely blessed. Thank you. And that's all I have for you for today, but thanks for stopping back in again. And hopefully here we'll be finishing up this fuselage pretty quickly, and we'll start mating the parts such as the wing and the tail feathers together, and dealing with things like hooking up the servos and how that's all going to go. Spring's coming. Weather's already starting to warm up. As soon as we can get our field open and have social distancing be right, then I'm going to plan on being out there and flying. So bring it on. Till then, have a great time. Don't get too stir crazy inside. But you know, as long as you're stuck inside, build yourself a plane.